Alpha Team is flying around the forest zone situated in northwest Raccoon City, where we're searching for the helicopter of our compatriots Bravo Team, who disappeared during the middle of our mission.
You haven't found it?
No, I haven't found it yet. Bizarre murder cases have recently occurred in Raccoon City. There are outlandish reports of families being attacked by a group of about 10 people. Victims were apparently eaten. Bravo Team went to the hideout of the group and disappeared.
Look, Chris!
It was Bravo Team's helicopter. Nobody was in it. But strangely, most of the equipment was still there. However, we soon discovered why.
Hey! Come here!
No! Don't go!
Jill, run for that house!
This is it, the end of our 2015 Halloween special. And we wanted to do something you've been asking for a very long time. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Project COE's review for Resident Evil on the SEGA Saturn. Now, there's absolutely no possible way I can show you everything that makes this game different than the PlayStation original. Maybe one day I can do a side-by-side comparison of all the different versions released on the PlayStation 1 and compare those to the Saturn version. But for today, you'll have to put up with a regular review. I will, however, tell you pretty much everything that's different with this version, and hopefully Saturn fans will go ahead and give it a try. It's an extremely faithful port of the PlayStation Classic. So, let us begin. The original Resident Evil was released on the PlayStation 1 back in 1996, and the director's cut hit a year later in 1997. Before the last version, the DualShock version of the director's cut, more famously known as the Greatest Hits version of Resident Evil, was released in 1998. The SEGA Saturn port was released in 1997, and it's based off of the very original version of the game. And while the director's cut did indeed include some cool extras like the beginner and arranged difficulty modes, as well as new costumes for Jill and Chris, an auto-aim feature, and a more powerful Beretta, the Saturn version wasn't a bare-bones Me Too port. It too features some pretty cool costumes. Okay, and a few other things. The Saturn's biggest addition is that of the battle mode, or battle game as it says in-game. Think of it something like the battle mode in Code Veronica, except no infinite ammo or first-person viewpoint. Here you make your way from one room to the next, taking out everything that moves. You only have a limited amount of supplies and you're trying to reach a designated area within a certain amount of time. Can you survive? There's a gold tyrant variation in the battle mode, which is about as strong as the regular tyrant, except that this bad boy has a ridiculous amount of health. You can even go up against the zombie Wesker in battle mode, which I always thought was absolutely awesome. There's even a new variation of the Hunter, known as the Tick, that's featured in the regular game. And I was gonna show this in the video, but I decided against it considering there isn't really that much visually new. So I want you to experience that for yourself. Now, that's a lot of content for fans of the PlayStation original. A lot of new stuff was included, and I was quite surprised when I first bought this game back in 1997. Now, at its core, this game is exactly what you'd expect. The puzzles are all the same, the mansion layout is the same, the story is the same. Well, pretty much everything is the same, because it's the same game as the original PlayStation version. So I want to dig just a bit deeper while you watch the gameplay so I can cover some of the pros and cons of this particular version of Resident Evil. Some of the backgrounds in the Spencer Mansion actually look a little bit better in the Saturn version compared to the PlayStation 1 version, although not all. The 3D models in particular I don't find quite as sharp as the ones featured in the PlayStation version. However, there is a serious reduction in the amount of clipping that takes place in this one. I don't really remember that, and I was kind of surprised when I captured this footage. I was like, hey, wait a second, I thought there was tons of clipping. I can certainly say, though, that the level of detail in the character models doesn't appear to be quite as high as in the PS1 original. The textures, lighting, and transparencies on the Saturn version have all been completely reworked or redone, and sadly for the most part they do look inferior to those on the PlayStation 1 version. But we're not talking about night and day difference as you can see in the video. This still looks like a very good game. The FMV has also been downgraded here, although I wonder how clean it would have looked had the Saturn made use of the video CD card that was released only in Japan. Alas, we'll never know. The music sounds exactly the same on the Saturn as it did on the PS1, and that makes sense because it's a CD-based game. Although some of the sound effects were redone and I'm just not a particular fan. I didn't like what Capcom did to the classic zombie groans. Some of the weapon sounds also have been changed. Some of the levels of oomph just aren't there compared to the original version. The other big difference you can probably tell in the video when you see the doors open. Notice how they like ajar open just a tad and then they open? Well, that's because the game does take a little bit longer to load. If you're like me, you'll feel it right away. But then I was kind of surprised because the saving is way faster on the SEGA Saturn version compared to the PlayStation 1 version, but it makes sense. The Saturn had an internal save feature, whereas the PlayStation 1 used memory cards. And that's about as deep of a conversation as I would like to have for now comparing the two versions. Maybe in the future I could do a full-on comparison of all 4 versions of Resident Evil 1 released on the PlayStation 1 and Saturn. For now, I know you're all gonna ask, so is it worth picking up the Saturn version? And the answer is, you're absolutely right, it is. The Saturn pad is fantastic for tank-controlled games because of its excellent, D-pad. To be honest, I loved playing the game again using the 3D controller, and not because I could use the 3D controller, it's because, it has a good D-pad, but also because you aim by pressing in the right trigger, and I don't know, it just feels good. While this version may not be as technically impressive as the PlayStation version, it's an excellent video game that Saturn fans should own. The asking price continues to rise, but if you look right now, you can score a copy for under $50 US, and that's good for everything you get in this package. Back in 1997, this was a game Saturn fans were extremely proud to own. And while it sucks we never got Resident Evil 2, I'm happy I can relive these classic moments with such a kick-ass gamepad. With that, we wrap up our review segment of the 2015 Halloween special. If you're watching this after the special has ended, or even while it's happening, go pick up Resident Evil on the SEGA Saturn and have a frighteningly good time. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Am I poisoned? Give me the serum.